Hello, I'm Locke Meredith. I'd like to invite you to join me on the next Legal Lines, where my special guest is District Attorney for East Baton Rouge Parish, Hillar Moore. Hillar Moore is going to tell us about the great improvement that we've had in crime over the last several years. He's going to tell us how it happened. He's going to talk about a new program where basically it's data mining, and they're learning to be proactive and stop crimes before they happen than having to be reactive. So join us on the next Legal Lines with District Attorney Hillar Moore.
It's time now for Legal Lines Tips with your host, Locke Meredith.
Hello, I'm Locke Meredith, and I have a Legal Lines tip for you. Remember, knowledge is power. And I want you to know if you're injured, Louisiana law grants you a variety of claims to make sure you're fully compensated. It's generally chopped up into several categories, the first being general damages. That's going to compensate you for your mental and physical pain and suffering, your scarring, disability, functional limitations, your loss of enjoyment of life. Also, it will compensate your family, frankly, for your loss of affection. It's called loss of consortium claim. Next category is specific damages. Those would be, say, for example, past and future lost wages, past and future medical expenses. You also have a claim sometimes for what's called punishment damages or punitive damages, typically only available when you're injured by a drunk party. Finally, you're entitled to legal interest from the date you file your lawsuit until you're paid and court costs. So my Legal Lines tip to you from me, Locke Meredith, make sure you know what your claims are.
This has been Legal Lines Tips with your host, Locke Meredith.
Hello, welcome to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith, and I'm very pleased to have back on the show Hillar Moore. Hillar is the District Attorney for the East Baton Rouge Parish in the city of Baton Rouge. Hillar, it's great to see you again.
Glad to be here.
Frankly, it's great to talk to you and kind of hear some really great progress that's taken place. Quickly, just tell the folks again a little bit of your background and what you do as the District Attorney for the parish.
Sure. The District Attorney handles all of the criminal cases for the state of Louisiana. We're a constitutional office. We have around 160 employees, around 60 or so, 55 to 60 attorneys. We have investigators, we have secretaries, and somewhat of a new addition, we have victims assistance counselors. And I think we have a very good office, very talented, dedicated people that do a lot of work outside of the office.
They've won awards.
Have won a lot of awards. And not only do we prosecute cases, but we do things in the community to try to avoid crime and prevent crime, and just to let the community know who we are as a person. Because oftentimes they just see us in court, they see us on television, they don't see the real side.
Right.
I guess the kinder, gentler side of the district attorney's office. And my office does a really good deal of doing that, and spend a lot of time, nighttime and weekends, giving away from their family.
Well, and in fact, I actually saw you recently on TV along with Sheriff Sid Gotro, and it was for remembrance of victims.
Right.
Tell the folks about that.
Every year we have a remembrance for the victims who died of gun violence and homicide the year before. Unfortunately, we still have to have that every year.
Yeah.
And our goal is to never have that or have the numbers reduced. It's just a way of letting these victims know that we don't forget about you, their families that survive, because they go through a lot. And there's really been a little bit of research done on how these homicides affect families for generations. We want to let them know that we're there with them, because it's a long healing process.
And you mentioned you have a division of your office now that helps victims and their families, and I know the sheriff also,
right,
and actually gives out monies on occasions to help families deal with the expenses and tribulations relating to it.
Victims of crime, we have reparation units that were able to help them bury children, bury family members. But a really important part are our victims assistance counselors. You know, in the past, the DA's office, you'd have investigators and attorneys, and they're in court all day long.
Right.
And it's hard to return a phone call or really to reach out and talk to a victim and really get to know them and their family. So while those attorneys and investigators are in court, do what they have to do, these victims assistance counselors go out and meet with victims, their family, go to barbecues, go to birthdays, get photographs, and it has a much better rapport for us with the victims and eventually prosecuting that case.
You know, when we were talking, we did a number of shows a couple years back with you and Sheriff Gotro and with the police chief, right, and with Mike Edmondson, the superintendent of state police. And back then, my recall is you had indicated you were dealing with about 20,000 crimes a year.
Actually, back when I started, so that's 8 years ago, we were averaging around 25,000 criminal cases that would come in a year, 40,000 traffic tickets, 3,000 juvenile cases, and several thousand family cases.
Domestic type of violence and et cetera?
Actually, child support.
Okay.
So fortunately now, over the past 8 years, we're down to around 19,000
which is
criminal
remarkable
cases, which is a big number. So I think crime has been, for the most part, down. maybe rise a little bit by a point or two per year, but overall around the country, despite some of the news that you may see in the individual locale, crime has remained somewhat down. Although in some mid-sized cities, major cities, you'll see really big spikes in homicide from time to time. I mean, look at Chicago, Baltimore,
Right.
places like that. Baton Rouge has really, for the most part, survived those really big spikes, and we've been on a really good path. But anything can happen at any time.
Well, and I remember part of the reason I kind of dove into that whole subject was a couple years or so more ago, our crime rate was comparable in terms of population and percentage of murders to Chicago
Sure.
and Los Angeles and all that. And
Right.
we were talking, and you were really focused along with other law enforcement on figuring out what to do, and
Right.
you'd implemented a lot of programs. So I wanted to kind of compare where we were back then to where we are today.
Well, that's a good report, one that I'm happy to say. So unfortunately, when you and I interviewed, it was 2012. And that year we had a very high number of homicides. My recollection was 85.
Yeah, it was amazing.
And at that point we were saying, why are people killing each other? And we reached out, we found Dr. Kennedy, David Kennedy, who started the Boston ceasefire. And we said, Doc, this is what the problem we're having. And he said, well, do you know why people are killing each other? And I said, no, but probably over drugs. He said, well, you need to find out. You need to do an audit. So we audited our murders for 3 years, and it turned out that people were killing each other because there were a group involved. And viewers may say gangs. We don't have the really gangs that LA has, but we have groups, small group of kids, 20 or 30 folks, that are either the victim or the defendant. So once we found out we had a group killing problem, we then audited our groups and came up with the number of groups that we had. And then we entered into the BRAVE model, which we were finally able to get a grant. And so our baseline year is 2012 from 85 murders, and since that time we have never reached that mark. In fact, have had a significant decline in homicides.
Well, and I think the number when y'all were remembering the victims were what, low 70s?
Last year was 75. Last year was a very unusual year
So
because
that
we
was
had
higher than what y'all
higher
been
than
experiencing?
we've been experiencing 65 to 63 from 85, which is a remarkable
Wow.
number.
Truly.
So last year we unfortunately had 8 double homicides and 2 triple, which really knocked the numbers out. But if they were made singles, would be very good. It'd be a very good year. Still way too many
Right.
numbers to deal with. And so we hope that this year will be another good year. Last year at the beginning of the year we started really well. Went through February, around 31 days of no homicides. And then we knew the summer was coming. Then the summer came. We had around 40 homicides in the summer, which really
Wow.
spiked that number up. And so this year, hopefully we can get better prepared for the summer. When kids are out of school, they have idle time. If we could get these kids jobs and get them something where they're not idle,
Activities.
get them activities, get them some help and assistance, keeping their minds occupied, getting the right message to them wherever they go, I think you see a significant impact. But
Well,
we hope to have a good year.
And as I understand it, you received grants for BRAVE, and this is the last year for BRAVE to exist, or you have to get additional grants?
Probably there's not a lot more money to go. We do have some money left over. Hopefully we'll be extended another year so that we can spend that money. Now, when that runs out, then we're going to have to figure out what to do.
And the whole concept of BRAVE was to do what? I mean, y'all had a process that you
was
used.
to identify those who are killing each other and becoming victims. And it turns out that those kids, a small group of kids of 500 to 700, they are 900 times more likely to kill or be killed than anybody else walking the streets of Baton Rouge.
So they're just killing each
It's a
other.
staggering number. They're killing each other over nonsense, complete nonsense. So the idea of BRAVE is to identify those potential killers, give them a moral message, and tell them things are different. If we want to help you, we don't want to put you in jail. Take our help. First of all, put your guns down. Second, if you don't put your guns down, if you kill someone, we're going to come after you. But we want to give you help. We don't want to put you in jail. We want to put you in a job. We want to put you in school. And we've been successful in that regard.
Excellent. Well, we'll return on the next segment. I want to talk about the new programs that you're
Sure.
implementing. This is Locke Meredith Legal Lines, and my very special guest, Hillar Moore, District Attorney of East Baton Rouge Parish. We'll be right back.
It's time now for Legal Lines Tips with your host, Locke Meredith.
Hello, I'm Locke Meredith with a Legal Lines tip for you. Document your claim. What do I mean? Whenever you present a claim, whether it's for injuries in an automobile collision or for a breach of contract case or a business claim, it all boils down to documentation and evidence. For example, when you go to trial, basically both sides are presenting their evidence of what they believe to be their case. For example, also, if you're involved in an automobile collision, document the event. Talk to all the parties who are involved. Get their names, address, contact information, insurance info. Talk to the witnesses on the scene. Also get their contact information. Take photographs. With the phones we all have these days, everybody can take a picture and that paints 1,000 words. So document your claim. The Legal Lines tip from me, Locke Meredith, to you is document the claim.
This has been Legal Lines Tips.
Welcome back to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith. Again, pleased to have back on the show Hillar Moore. He's the district attorney for East Baton Rouge Parish in the city of Baton Rouge. Hillar, let's dive back in. You talked about Brave and how successful it's been. Only got about probably a year left or so. You've also implemented a new program along with other law enforcement, as I understand it. Explain it, because it sounds amazing.
So in addition to Brave, we started the violent crime unit with the sheriff, Segotro, Chief Davide, and with Mike Edmondson, Colonel of State Police. So that's doing very well with the violent crime.
And that's been going on for years now.
For years now. So we're doing well while working together. So the next thing that we started was a crime strategy unit. It's an intelligence-driven prosecution unit that's modeled after the one in Manhattan, in New York.
I've seen a TV show called Person of Interest. Is it kind of like
not really,
that?
but we're not quite as good looking as the show. But this is pretty simple. It says, go to the community, find out what the community feels, where are the problems. That can direct you to where the problems are. And then look at your data. Let your data drive you to where you go. So instead of in the past in law enforcement just corralling a whole bunch of folks that are doing some bad things, why don't you focus your efforts on the person that's driving the crime or the place or location that's driving the crime, and you can have a bigger impact.
Interesting.
So that's what we did. We went to Manhattan for their symposium that they had, and literally while we were there with our researchers from LSU, our computer folks, and others from the office, they were on their phones actually starting that crime strategy unit. We got that unit up and running in 3 months, which is phenomenal.
Remarkable.
It's a very big operation. So what we do is we just look at data, look at all the police reports, and we mine the police reports and look for persons, places, locations, times, different events. We look at lighting, look at street walks, signs, entrances to buildings. Are there, where are the crime cameras? Do you have license plate readers there? And then we go through the neighborhood and talk to the folks, and they give us information. We do roundups through the neighborhood with probation and parole. And so for the crime strategy unit, right now we're focused similarly on Brave to 70802, 715, which fits in with Brave. We've also found another area here in the Kleinpeter area, which has a big number of calls for service. So we've dedicated a prosecutor, investigator, and our data collection there as well. So now we're in 3 areas, and you may have seen we had some uptick in crime in Tigerland.
Right.
We've expanded a little bit, taken on as a pet project in Tigerland. So the unit, it's a fantastic unit.
It also sounds flexible.
It is very flexible. And that's the beauty of the design. We have some really dedicated, talented folks that have worked very, very hard.
And so this is just a group associated only with the district attorney or the whole law enforcement community?
So it's mainly district attorney employees. However, they collaborate with all
the source, eyes and ears of everybody.
So surely we couldn't do it on our own. And so we have employed there. Will Morris is the head of the unit, the section chief. We have another assistant district attorney, Aishla Burgess, who is very familiar with juvenile court and the little groups that we have. And we have a assistant United States attorney who's a retired FBI agent. So we have that federal component that's in there. They each take a different area of the city. They also each have a DA investigator, and also assigned to that we have a victims assistance counselor that can reach out to the victims of major crimes in these areas. And what also drives the unit is that we were fortunate to have the Louisiana National Guard become employed. We are fortunate to have 2 very talented National Guard human intelligence analysts that mine data and look at social media and the computer powers that these people have, and the mapping capabilities of mapping people and what are they doing with each other. And you get to see who's doing what with each other, and you get to put circles around folks that are maybe
seem to be in the wrong place at the right time, huh?
Correct. Maybe a broker of crime, and who's brokering between 2 different groups, and where's there uptick in robberies or burglaries? There's a problem here. Let's go try to find out what's going on. So it directs us to an area instead of waiting on a phone call.
You're proactive.
We see it. You see it being mapped in front of you. And in addition to that, we have 8 criminal justice or students from LSU, actually social work students that somewhat major in criminology from LSU that help us with social media and data mining as well. And they do it for a semester at a time for coursework. And we give them a little graduation present at the end when they finish. These people are valuable. They work very hard. But that's also, as I mentioned, coupled with going to the streets and talking to people and doing things on the weekends.
And that was another component that we discussed, years ago, that the community, there was some leeriness of folks in the community wanting to kind of partner with law enforcement. Has that concern been allayed to some degree now?
I think to some degree, but it's going to always be there. So our commitment was when we started Brave is that we're here to help you. We want you working with us. And I think they were really skeptical because they've seen that before where police or law enforcement have come there, given a picnic, they're given a giveaway, and it's like the cavalry, they ride away.
Right.
So we told them that we're not going away, we're going to continue to come back. And so we have continued to go back to those different communities, and we're not leaving, we're there for good. And we can always do a better job with relations with people. Things change. I think our biggest goal, our biggest problem now is always getting to the kids, getting the children, getting the families, getting them the help that they need. That's where we really need to continue to focus as a state, I think as a nation, but particularly for Baton Rouge. What we found is that if you have one kid who's at risk and has had multiple arrests or detentions, that oftentimes you may not be able to get to that kid, but you can possibly get to that kid's siblings and the mom. Because if you just take that one child, he's going to go back to the same family, same home, and things are not going to get any better.
So it's like a red flag.
Absolutely.
Come help my family.
Absolutely. You have to take care of the entire family.
How is the community able to kind of contribute to this data mining? I mean, is there a website or something they should go to?
We actually have a newsletter that we put out in 2005 and 2002 to let them know what we're doing. One of the biggest things we found is that we would go ask the people, tell me what your problems are. And it could be just a pothole in the front of her street or some walkway that kids are walking through and they're running from cops or whatever. And we never really went back to them and say, hey, I just fixed your problem. So now we're learning, we have to communicate back with these folks, and then they continue to cooperate.
So you told me about this problem and we took care of it.
Or we made that arrest on the person you said you thought was dealing drugs. You didn't have to be the one that gave us the information. We developed it on our own, and now hopefully your neighborhood's a little bit better.
Let's shift gears a little bit, because I know I recently read that there's been, again, discussions of the misdemeanor jail, and that we have 160,000 outstanding warrants that are just being ignored. And I'm trying to figure out why we still don't have a misdemeanor jail or some system that deals with this.
Well, Representative Alfred Williams, who's since passed that legislation. And when we tried to get the money to open up the jail.
And so this is at the state level. The state legislature was considering a bill to fund a misdemeanor jail.
No, the state did fund. The state authorized a court cost, which we collected. We have around 1.1 million. We asked to use the money from the city council to open up the misdemeanor jail. That request was denied. And
all right. Well, let's continue this on the next segment. This is Locke Meredith Legal Lines. My guest, Mr. Hillar, he is the district attorney for East Baton Rouge Parish. We'll be right back.
It's time now for Legal Lines Tips with your host, Locke Meredith.
Hello, I'm Locke Meredith, and I have a Legal Lines tip for you. Remember, knowledge is power. And I want you to know if you're injured and you have lost wages because of that injury, Louisiana law gives you a claim for that loss. Typically, it's going to require medical evidence from a medical doctor stating because of your injuries, you can't work. It's a pretty simple claim. If you had a job before the injury, doc says you can't work from the date of the accident, and 3 months later he says you can work, you can figure out what you've lost in wages. Circumstances occur, however, when the injury results in permanent physical and functional limitations. Now you can't do the job, according to the doctor, that you could do before the accident. So the question becomes, is there any work you can do, and what is the difference in wages? But the court doesn't just look at what you earned in the past, it also looks at your earning capacity. That is your ability to earn wages in the future, promotions, additional education. So my Legal Lines tip from me, Locke Meredith, to you is make sure you know your rights when you're presenting that lost wage claim.
This has been Legal Lines Tips.
Welcome back to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith. I'm pleased to have back on the show Hillar. He's the district attorney for East Baton Rouge Parish in the city. Hillar, let's dive back in. We were talking about the programs that you have used along with other law enforcement very successfully to reduce crime. Let's talk about the misdemeanor jail, because I've done shows for years now where everybody I've talked to has talked about how relevant and necessary that is, and yet still we don't have one.
Well, apparently that idea now is dead with new legislation to take the money and stop the collection of the cost and use the money elsewhere. But the idea was never just to incarcerate someone who has a traffic ticket. Of that 160,000 outstanding warrants.
And let's say that again, 160,000
Yeah, you'd like to have Tiger Stadium that big. And
explain to folks what warrants are.
Warrants are you either didn't come to court.
Right, the court says you didn't show up at court, I'm sending people out to arrest you, right?
And
Make you come to court, do what you're supposed to do.
Correct, just do what you're supposed to do.
And nobody's worried about it because it never happens.
And there's no teeth in, no one goes to jail, no one's penalized, punished,
no consequence.
no one comes after you. So, but the idea of jail was never to incarcerate folks on a traffic ticket. The idea was just to have people obey the law, and whenever you are arrested or charged with a misdemeanor, instead of going to parish prison, where all the bad folks go, you would go to a misdemeanor facility, bond would be quickly set, you'd get in and out. In fact, on our trial runs that we did, 85% of the folks were gone within hours, and those that had to stay had other warrants that kept them, or they had to go to the parish prison. And Dr. Shahada did the studies during that time where crime was decreased around 25%, because people they know in the street, hey, if you get picked up tonight, you're not going to just get a summons, you're going to go to court. And the issuance of the summonses in the past have people ignore coming to court because it's just a sheet of paper.
Right.
After some period of time, it's gone. So, look, I understand people's concerns. I don't want the misdemeanor jail to be a divisive thing for Baton Rouge, so we'll move on.
But wait, I want to back up just a tad, because from what I'm understanding that you're saying, the misdemeanor jail actually protected folks from potentially ending up in the parish prison where the really truly bad actors are.
Right.
But now they don't even have this option. It's gone.
Correct. But I think that others saw that as we're going to go out and round up folks on traffic tickets and just put them in jail, and it would be a disproportionate amount of folks that were disadvantaged that would wind up in jail. I understand their concerns, but that was never what the idea was behind it.
Well, I know you'd also been discussing amnesty.
Yeah, we had a very successful amnesty day. Once the expenditure was shot down, we had around 1,500 people that showed up on a Saturday to take care of their tickets. So I think we ought to continue doing that type of amnesty day, but to have it outside of the court cost us like $35,000.
Wow.
Okay. It took us a lot of time to do it. We'd like to have it downtown where the judge is already there, recording devices are there, but people are maybe a little more reluctant to come downtown, and parking's tough. So maybe we can have it downtown at the court on a Saturday, clear up some warrants, get people back to where they're not afraid to drive or afraid to do things.
Well, and I remember in the past that there were 2-week periods of time that y'all would have this process set up.
When
the city would bring in hundreds of thousands of dollars.
The city city court does a very good job on getting warrants resolved. And so yes, when we had the misdemeanor jail open, people knew there was a potential they could go to jail, and the line wrapped around the building for people to take care of your business.
Right.
So we're going to move on from there. But I think that when we get a new prison, that a misdemeanor facility should be incorporated, which I think it will, and that way I think we'll eventually get the misdemeanor jail that we've always wanted.
And I was actually talking with Sheriff Sid Goto, and he was indicating, sooner or later the court's going to get involved. The federal court is going to say, y'all going to have to fix this prison, build a new prison, because this is unacceptable.
It'll cost us twice as much when that happens, and so we don't want to get there.
All right. Well, so tell me about the kind of new problems that you're facing as a prosecutor in terms of going after criminals. I've heard something about this cell phone stuff, encryption.
Yeah, so
Apple phones.
The Brittany Mills case, a young lady was murdered a year ago this month. She was pregnant, 8 months pregnant. A baby lasted a few days,
right.
Died after that.
Very
so
sad.
It's a double murder. Very little left at the scene. I mean, she just killed right at the door. Someone knocks on the door. She opens. She's shot several times.
Beautiful young lady.
Yeah. So what we have left behind now at the scene is a cell phone. It's her phone. It's an Apple phone, iOS 8.2, and it's encrypted. And she did not back up her phone to the iCloud for the 3 months prior to her death. So in the past, we always were able to ask Apple to give us the information from the iCloud, which they did in this case, but we were missing 3 months because she didn't back it up. So that 3 months is actually on her device, her phone itself. And Apple has advertised and said they cannot get into their phones because they've designed it that way,
right.
that even if they get a search warrant, they can't get into it.
And we've seen it on the national media where the FBI wants it because of the San Bernardino murders.
So we are now
a terrorist.
So we cannot get into her phone, and her family indicates that she kept a diary on the phone. We'd like to get into that phone.
Wow. So you could probably certainly lead you to more
Potentially.
information.
And we could get there and there's nothing on the phone.
What a rub though, because this is the whole NSA, you know,
Snowden.
going in and listening to people and getting access to info
And
versus
That's kind of what
privacy.
started the whole thing. And we've been in contact with the FBI, been in contact with the San Bernardino folks, Quantico, and they indicated they would eventually probably be able to help states and folks like me. They're well aware of my case. We've been around the nation on this case with the FBI and with Comey before the Senate and the House. But unfortunately, once they cracked that phone in San Bernardino, they made the process classified. So now they
Interesting.
can't
So
give
you
it to
don't
me.
get it.
So
we'll see
we're
where
stuck.
this goes then.
Yes.
Recidivism, the fancy word for
Yeah.
saying folks who go to jail tend to go back to jail pretty quickly, at least 1 out of every 2, at least within a few years.
Yes. We are.
How do we deal with this?
Doing a lot of work on this right now. 65%, 50 to 65 go back within the first 18 months. Normally for drugs, normally for a gun. We find that these people, they don't have jobs, they don't have the skills. But the Secretary of the Department of Corrections, Jimmy LeBlanc, and his staff are really doing a good job of a tool, an assessment tool, so that before someone gets out of prison, they're going to give them this risk assessment tool and find out what's their strengths, what their weaknesses, and try to direct them to a spot to prevent them from recidivating and maybe continue keeping up with these guys at the end of their sentence as opposed to just letting them out, not following them, not helping them. And I think you're going to see a big difference once we get that implemented, put a lot of work into that. And I think that if you see that, if you work on the juvenile end,
Right.
and then you work on the back end of recidivism,
No, get them before they go in, and if they go in, help them
really
stay
good
out.
chance that you're going to cut that number of people down in your jail population and in your prison population, and you're going to be serving the community better.
Because I know on a national level, we're hearing about, you know, sentencing nonviolent criminals for long periods of time. All they do in jail is learn how to be better criminals. They don't receive anything.
Yeah.
And we got to come up with some system different because it's not working.
And we would agree that you don't want to put nonviolent offenders in jail for an exorbitantly long time. However, I think the problem is that when they pick a case, and they're going to pick a drug case, actually what the DA did in that drug case is that there was probably an automatic weapon that was used. And
A lot of stuff we don't know about that's
the DA
bad.
dismissed the weapon, which is much more time, and let this person plead and do jail time to a drug offense.
All right,
He's-
Hillar. Thank you so much.
All
I very much appreciate it. This is Locke Meredith with Legal Lines. My very special guest, Hillar Moore, East Baton Rouge Parish District Attorney. Thank you for being with us.